this is Stephanie, Talk Tales and Trivia. I am crazy today. I woke up in this crazy, excited mood today. And I think it has to do with the topic that we are going to talk about. It's so great for me to actually talk about this topic because it's been on my mind for a long time. Punk rock. Well, to those of you that don't really know what punk rock is, I'm sure you've heard the words, but you don't really understand them. Here I am to explain it to you today. You know, punk rock is a loud, fast-moving, and aggressive form of rock music, popular in the late 70s and early 80s. When I was a baby, punk rock is a music genre that developed in the early to mid-70s, really in the United States, the United Kingdom, and Australia, basically. It was rooted in 1960s garage rock and other forms of what is now known as proto-punk. Punk rock bands rejected perceived excesses of mainstream 1970s rock. From dictionary.com, I find, quote, a type of rock and roll reaching its peak in the late 1970s and characterized by loud, insistent music and abusive or violent protest lyrics. What were they protesting? We'll talk about that in a little while. Whose performers and followers are distinguished by extremes of dress and socially defiant behavior. Yeah, punk rockers were really mad. England's punk scene had political and economic roots. The economy in the United Kingdom was in poor shape, really, really bad shape, and unemployment rates were an all-time high. England's youth were angry, rebellious, and out of work. They had strong opinions and a lot of free time. That is where punk rock began. This is the beginning of punk fashion as well. It centered around one shop. The shop was simply called Sex, S-E-X, and it was owned by Malcolm McLaren. Now, if you haven't heard that name before, it's okay because here I am ready to tell you who he is. He's pretty influential as far as the music genre. Malcolm McLaren had recently returned to London from the United States, where he had unsuccessfully tried to reinvent the New York Dolls, and that is a band that David Johansen was in that time frame, 1970s or so. But he came back after unsuccessfully helping the New York Dolls to sell his clothing line. He was determined to do it again, but this time looked to the youth who worked and hung out in this shop to be his next project. That is where the Sex Pistols came in. This project would become the Sex Pistols Project, and they would be developing a following very quickly after Malcolm McLaren did his magic on them. The youth acting violent or defying societal standards, that's really what he really wanted to capture. That was all part of the plan. The bands such as the Sex Pistols stand out as the epitome of what punk rock is, and that is exactly what Malcolm McLaren wanted. He wanted anarchist behavior that does not make sense to ordinary societal standards of living. He wanted the disoriented confusion. He wanted the upset, weird stuff that went on there. He wanted the older generation to wonder what was going on with the youth. The New York Lower East Side had a huge punk rock scene as well in the late 70s and early 80s. And it was in such places like Trash and Vaudeville, much of the same situation as Malcolm McLaren's store Sex had. They had a lot of people, influential people, and customers hanging out in their stores. And they honed in on the punk rock style that include pants, T-shirts, shoes, etc. So you really got a chance to meet and mingle with these people. Trash and Vaudeville was a place that I went to often. I would get off the train at Grand Central, take a bus for 60 cents down to St. Mark's Place, and go into Trash and Vaudeville. That was a very cool thing for me to do on a Saturday. And it was in Trash and Vaudeville that I met so many cool people. Also, there was a Patricia Field store right down the street. Well, we know her from the designing of the clothes in Sex and the City. Before that, she had a store that was a little bit on the edge. It wasn't really punky like trash and vaudeville, but it was attracting people of that sort. And it really had a great punk rock edge to it. And then there was CBGB, a club on the Lower East Side that gave bands like Blondie and the Ramones their first start. And CBGB actually stood for something. A lot of people wonder what it stands for, and I'm going to tell you right now. It stands for Country, Bluegrass, and Blues. Now, the founder of CBGB really wanted that form of music to be played in this club, but he didn't have that choice. He didn't have that chance. It wasn't really a punk rock hangout at first, but it quickly turned into a maven for punk rock bands. It became the undisputed birthplace of punk. That's pretty cool, right? Quote, founded on the Bowery in New York City by Hilly Crystal in 1973, CBGB was originally intended to feature its namesake musical styles, country, bluegrass, blues, but became a forum for American punk and new wave music. It really was for the bands like the Ramones and Blondie, Talking Heads, Television, Patti Smith Group, and of course my favorite, Joan Jett. They all played there. From the early 1980s until its later years, it would mainly become known for hardcore punk. And if you were to go by it right now, it's closed. But back in the 1970s and 1980s, it was really known for its hardcore punk. Later on, punk rock in the mid-1980s had its own subgenres, which is quite interesting in its own right. The subgenres of punk included alternative rock, new wave, ska. It had bands such as The Clash, The Cars, The Police, Culture Club, Adam and the Ants, A Flock of Seagulls, ABC, Soft Cell. These were all bands that I personally followed, but they were all under the subcategory of punk. Many of the London neighborhoods that were considered punk became popular because of their heavily integrated large Jamaican population. This led to the creation of Ska Punk. Well, if you don't know what Ska Punk is, you should really listen to it. It's really quite fun. It's about 10 people really getting up on stage and doing their thing. Ska Punk blends the rhythms of Jamaican ska with the heavier beats of punk. It's similar to traditional ska, but faster and heavier. They have a horn section, and that is very common within ska bands. Now, I want to tell you a little bit of history. No Doubt, with Gwen Stefani, started out as being a ska band. That's really what she wanted. That was her aim. And if you look at the past videos of No Doubt, there were elements of ska in that first or second CD. Now, she had a whole bunch of people, and they were playing different instruments, and she had a ska love, and she wanted to bring that onto her stage and to the music presence that she had. Many early bands, most notably The Clash, experimented with ska and reggae. At some point in their careers, the beats of ska and reggae were really prominent in The Clash. They didn't make it the foundation of the music, but it was definitely the American ska punk in the late 80s and 90s that really made that happen. Now, also, we know about the death of Joe Strummer from Clash. That was a very, very major thing for me. He died at the age of 50 and was really a big influence on me in the music that I listened to. Of course, there's other subgenres of punk, and those are the subgenres of pop punk, and that's bands like Green Day, Blink-182, Offspring. Those are all pop punk. They at least have one single that's popular within the mainstream, but basically they are punk. There's plenty of subgenres of punk, and there are more and more coming out every day. Mostly I find that punk itself has become very hardcore, and so I don't really like it hardcore like that. But I really can appreciate where it came from and how it grew up to be what it is today, pretty much. and what it has done to music in general. Today I find that although I don't really listen to as much punk rock as I used to, I see so many teenagers and young boys and girls, young men and women, dressing in that punk style. Well, it's not called punk anymore, it's called goth. Maybe you've seen it too. You certainly know the word. But what it really is black, wearing black and having like this pale skin and having mini skirts and fishnet stockings and Doc Martens, all the things that I did when I was in love with that punk rock lifestyle that I really told you about in this episode. It's quite interesting and fun to watch the youth of today. My nieces really have taken a hold of that goth look that I used to dress like when I was in high school and college. It's quite funny to watch. I hope that you have enjoyed this episode of Punk Rock, and I hope that you do some of your own research on the subgenres of punk rock. You know, everything has a history within something. Everything has a subgenre within a genre. If you explore any genre, you will find subgenres underneath it. And that is the same with music, having the subgenre of punk rock and then having the subgenres of different types of punk rock. Isn't that fun? Oh, I think it is. It's very, very interesting. If you would like to ask any questions or give me your feedback, I am here for you at talktalesandtrivia@gmail.com. Or you can email us at talktalesandtrivia@gmail.com, but you can also go to Talk Tales and Trivia on Facebook and Talktales, etc. on Twitter. And you can go to talktalesandtrivia.com to listen to past episodes and read my blog posts, which I just put up a new one today. And you can certainly do that as well. But you can also subscribe. Subscribe. Push that purple button on your iPhone. Do it now. And you can also download our app. We'd love that too. That is it for our episode of Talk Tales and Trivia. You know, our research team is working on a Saturday to get ready for the next week's episode. And I hope you stay tuned. Our next week's episode is going to be a doozy. See ya!